All right. Let me invite DM. Sarah. There we go. Yeah, I feel like I actually feel really stupid because I see a lot of dogs. I think.
Yeah, but it's Ken Singer. Ken Singer also uses it.
I think, and this is just me being honest about it. I think a lot of times we're bitching about the Ukraine money being sent over. So I don't think people take us per se as pro-Ukraine, which, to be quite honest, when it comes down to it, I mean, we are, we don't like Putin, right? I mean, that's just the way we've kind of done our spaces. So, but I think the reason why I haven't seen them in mass is because we don't have, we don't talk about it in depth. We do more of like legal topics or things like that. All right, so here we go. All right, so Jackson's here, Sarah's here. Can you guys both hear me? Yeah. Okay, perfect. All right, so what we'll do is we'll make it brief. Let me move over to my computer here. So what we'll do is we have some generalized questions about Ukraine and Russia, the war that's going on. We also have questions about the United States and their involvement in it. Not many questions. I am actually going to probably generate 2 or 3 questions. I don't want to take too much of your time, so you guys let me know. My thought process is it's 3:15. I was thinking at 4 o'clock. We should probably be done on this, but what we'll do is what I'd like to do is that it's going to be 3:15 here in a second. For you, you have up to 5 minutes. You have up to 5 minutes to make your opening statement. Whatever you want to talk about regarding the Russia-Ukraine war and how it affects the United States is really, really the basis of it. And then you can talk about the war itself. You can talk about whatever you want. So we'll give you both 5 minutes to give opening statements. Then we have about 6 or 7 questions in general. We may have some follow-up. And then rules are don't interrupt each person. So you'll have 2 minutes to answer the question that's posed. Please answer the question that's posed. Don't go off on what you want to tell us. Please answer the question that's posed to you. And don't interrupt each other, because if you interrupt each other, I'll just hit the mute button. Don't argue with each other. Take notes. Let the person speak. When the person's done, you'll have a chance to retort. So the first question after opening statements, we'll start with Sarah. Sarah will get to answer for 2 minutes. Jackson will get 2 minutes, and then Sarah will get 30 seconds to rebut. The next question will go to Jackson, same format. So 2 minutes, and you get a rebuttal. Pretty simple. We've done it before. So it's 3:15. Let me go to Sarah. Sarah, you have 5 minutes to talk about the Russia-Ukraine war, what's going on over there, what you see happening, and how it affects the USA, whether or not we should be in a proxy war. And really, the floor is yours. Go ahead.
So I appreciate it. I also appreciate the fact that Jackson decided to join in. I know he's been very stressed out at USC with some of his studies, and so I hope he learns a little bit today. Ultimately, what we have here is the greatest return on U.S. taxpayer dollars when it comes to foreign affairs since World War II. And the notion that it's a proxy war, and not to address you directly, but I have to since this is the opening statement, it's not a proxy war. This is a fight by a sovereign nation for its freedom. Its territorial integrity has been absolutely breached, along with the fact that you have a president of another nation leading an invasion of a sovereign territory for no reason but to enslave that land and be able to try to strip the minerals and other valuable assets of that land. It is the epitome of imperialism. It's the epitome of colonialism, and it's the reasoning behind Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine. And so what the United States has done, as all of the allied nations of Ukraine have chosen to do in some form or another, is to stand up for the rule of law and norms. Since before World War II, actually, we're talking about the notion of alliances standing up in the face of a rogue nation, rogue state that goes back hundreds, if not thousands of years. And I turn the floor over to Jackson.
Okay, so it's 3:17. Sarah took about 2.5 minutes or so. So it is 3:17. Jackson, you have up until 5 minutes if you want on 3:22. Otherwise, if you don't want to use all of it, that's fine as well. Your opening statement, Jackson.
Sarah, can you define what imperialism is?
Well, we can get to that in a second. Just start with your opening statement and then...
Well, before I do my opening statement, you just claimed that Russia's acting like an imperialist state. So define imperialism.
Yeah, just go ahead and address it in your opening statement.
I'm not going to do it until Sarah defines imperialism.
Okay, so so we haven't gotten the question and answer yet. Is that your opening statement?
Sure.
Okay. Opening statement done by Jackson. Okay, so here we go. We're going to go into the first question. As I said, we're going to start with Sarah, then we'll go back to Jackson. Sarah, the top question I got.
No, Sarah's got to answer my question.
Okay, so what we'll do then is for the first question, Sarah, we'll go to you, and then the second question I'll go back to you because I have my first question here that everyone wanted to ask. The first question for you, Sarah, and then Jackson will get a rebuttal time. You each have 2 minutes. Sarah, can you define what imperialism is and how it is affecting the Russia-Ukraine war?
Imperialism is an extension of one nation's influence or sphere of influence in regard to international affairs. And we can look at it in multiple ways if you want to use the term imperialism, which I did use. And in the case of Russia, this idea of imperialism cannot be utilized without saying their neighboring country of Ukraine, but they did it through a way that attempted to colonize Ukraine and to colonize Ukraine forcefully.
So you just explained how they're attempting to do this. You didn't tell. Do you know what the 5 principal forms of, imperialism and, monopoly imperialism are? Can you even tell me that?
Debate. I'm not going to take part in.
I'm sorry. Is Sarah breaking up for you guys? Or is that just me?
Sarah, you're breaking up right now. Let's see if we can hear you better. I don't know. I couldn't make anything of what you just said.
I can't hear what Sarah's saying all that well, but for the audience listening, imperialism is not whatever Sarah just attempted to define it as. Imperialism is not just when you send troops into another country. Imperialism is an economic system. It's monopoly, and monopoly manifests itself in 5 different forms: cartels, syndicates, and trusts, the monopolistic position of big banks, the seizure of sources of raw materials, the economic partition of the world by international cartels, and the territorial partition of the world then becomes complete, essentially. And Russia doesn't meet any of these qualifications when it comes to the special military operation in Ukraine. In fact, the special military operation in Ukraine is an attempt to counter the globalist imperialism that's being waged by the deep state in the United States and the city of London. They are waging this war. It's a proxy war against the Russians. The reason why is because the Russians do hold a significant amount of commodities power. The West is a hyper-financialized, system of finance capital that doesn't produce anything anymore, with the exception of some states in the EU, Germany, Italy being the 2 main ones. But even then, still, the EU is collapsing right now because of their energy issues. And German industry is falling apart because of just how expensive their energy is, and it's making all their other, raw minerals and resources very expensive. But Russia is doing very well right now, as is China, because they're commodity powers, they're commodities producers. They're going to do very well for the next 10, 20, 30 years probably. And this poses a threat to the West. The West understands that there's a multipolar world that is forming, and this is their last attempt. It's the last war. It's the last war of civilizations in an attempt to maintain U.S. hegemonic control. The last thing I'll say is that the West promised, the Russian people many, many, many years ago in the 90s, early 90s, that they wouldn't extend NATO 1 inch east past of Germany. Granted, that wasn't a paper agreement. It wasn't signed on paper. It was a verbal agreement. But they made that agreement, and they extended NATO 14 times east of their German line. So, the Russians have warned about this for years. They tried to establish multiple peace agreements with the Ukrainians via the Minsk Accords and the Minsk II Accords. And the Ukrainians and the Germans have since come out and said that they weren't serious about these negotiations. And it was all an attempt to buy Ukraine more time in preparation for the proxy war we are now witnessing. So, no, this is not a great investment on U.S. taxpayer money. This is a money laundering scheme to make the military-industrial complex richer and to try and preserve Western hegemony. It's failing, and we're seeing that on full display. Over 100,000 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory seized, probably 115,000 more Ukrainian soldiers dead than Russian soldiers. And, just this week we saw Soledar taken, we saw Klishivka taken, we see that Bakhmut is about to fall. We're about to see indirect territorial encirclement of Bakhmut. So not going well for Ukraine.
All right, Jackson, thanks. We're going to kind of take that as your opening statement. We need Sarah back, though, so I sent her a DM. She fell out about a minute or two ago, so we're going to wait on Sarah to come back.
Can I just, to keep the clock going, I'll ask Jackson a few questions?
Well, to be quite honest,
it's all right. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, no, I don't want Jackson to talk without, or talk anymore without Sarah here.
Yeah, I didn't know.
Okay. All right. So Sarah, Jackson just finished up as you came back. Can you hear me, Sarah?
I can. And by the way, so the audience understands, I just sent a bunch of screenshots to Crypto. I'm having significant connection issues right here. So I'm going to try my best, but I don't know. It's
Yeah, it's fine. If you fall out, you fall out. It's not the end of the world. All right. So Jackson said this much more eloquently than I did. You'll have a chance to have a rebuttal here. But Jackson spoke about that it's not a good return on the investment for the U.S. That this is essentially an economic control by, I think, the United States and Russia to control Ukraine.
I did not say that.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jackson. Go ahead then. I'm sorry. I don't want to misspeak for you.
Briefly, what I said was that I think Sarah probably understands what my point is, but what the West is doing is an effort to use Ukraine as a geopolitical pawn after promising for years they wouldn't, and for years that they would try to establish peace against Russia because Russia poses a threat to U.S. hegemonic power.
Got it. Okay. I
also defined imperialism, which is something that Sarah could not do despite the fact that she claimed Russia is imperialist.
Okay. So the one part that you spoke about is that you mentioned that the U.S. has extended NATO 14 times. You also mentioned that. So let me go to Sarah. Sarah, what is your take on what Jackson just said, plus the U.S. extending NATO closer and closer to Russia?
My definition of imperialism is the correct definition of imperialism.
You literally couldn't even define it. You could not define it.
I literally gave you the definition.
No.
The second part is that the United States has never expanded NATO because NATO is a treaty of multiple nations, as everyone knows on this panel. And therefore, the United States doesn't make unilateral decisions. The idea that the United States makes unilateral decisions when it comes to NATO is something that's steeped in conspiracy and leads to this idea of hegemonic power by the U.S. when the U.S. is just one nation of many that is acting in concert to advance its own interest as well as the interests of allied nations.
Okay, so first
That's
question here
literally
that I have.
that's literally
Go ahead,
insane.
Jackson. Go ahead.
NATO. So the United States is by far the largest, military within NATO. Pretty much whatever the United States goes, with the exception of certain holdouts like we've seen with Turkey this past year, with Finland and Sweden. How how could you ever make the argument that NATO is not controlled by the United States? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. It's a conspiracy to assume that the United States does not control NATO.
Okay, the people in here will be able to make their minds up. I want to go to the first question here, which actually came out during your guys' opening, and then I'll go to our first question from the people that wrote to me. So Jackson, I'm going to go to you. You have 2 minutes. It's 3:27. First question is: should the U.S. be involved in the Ukraine-Russia war?
No, the United States should not. And I'm saying this as someone who, I support Russia's special military operation, but no, the U.S. should not be involved in any capacity in it. And this would not be going on if it were not for the United States intervening in the domestic politics of Ukraine since before Ukraine was even a sovereign state. Back since before the splitting of the Soviet Union, the CIA was meddling in the internal affairs in Ukraine and trying to make it a sovereign state. And then we saw in the 2004 color revolution, the United States helped overturn the elections. Of course, in 2014, it was the most notable example in which the United States overturned the elections in Ukraine and manufactured the Euromaidan. I mean, the Euromaidan protests did start out naturally. It wasn't like it was a U.S. conspiracy that they started it. It was natural, but the United States took control of it. They weaponized, violence with Georgian snipers and Ukrainian terrorists and Nazis within the Euromaidan movement. And they created a very, very, very violent situation that led to the overthrow of the government. And it was an illegal overthrow of the government. And now we find ourselves in this situation because of those very actions.
All right, Sarah, you have 2 minutes to respond.
I appreciate the fact that this is taking place tonight, because what we've seen is that Jackson is answering your questions with conspiracies that are not based in any sort of fact, any sort of reality. And what I hope that comes out of this is not just the understanding that the United States is not playing God here, is not pushing things with an invisible hand, but that Jackson is so deep inside of this conspiracy within his own mind that it's driving him into a paranoia. So I hope Jackson's able to get assistance when this is finished and he listens to the recording again.
Okay, Sarah, back to you, though. Should the U.S. be involved in this Ukraine-Russia war?
I think the United States has to be involved in any situation where they're asked to by a sovereign nation to become involved. President Zelensky, as well as the Rada, reached out to the U.S. The U.S. chose to respond to that calling and get involved at the invitation of President Zelensky and not due to its own decision to become involved. The United States, under President Biden, has attempted to make decisions in concert with the ruling elected office holders in Ukraine in this particular instance. And I think that they did so at the invitation of President Zelensky and not getting involved on their own, which is a huge difference and which goes against what Jackson is opining on and, in fact, is wrong.
All right, Jackson, you have a minute if you want to respond.
Listen, I know that Sarah, transgender, who LARPs as a soldier in the Ukrainian military, might be confused about the material reality of the situation we're discussing. But I mean, the facts are quite clear. I mean, the George Soros even came out. He has the Renaissance Foundation, which is like a subsidiary of the Open Societies Foundation, which we all know he uses to, interfere in the domestic politics of nations that are adversarial to the United States, and has done so for decades. But he even came out right when the Euromaidan coup was, wrapping up, and he said, I set up a foundation in Ukraine before Ukraine became independent of Russia, and the foundation has been functioning ever since, and it played a very important part in the events that we're seeing right now. And that was a conversation about the coup in 2014. I mean, we could go further about the fact that Renaissance Foundation shared an office with the U.S. Embassy in Victoria Nuland, who was doing speeches with the Euromaidan terrorists as the violence was raging in the Euromaidan coup, and she was handing out cookies to protesters. We could talk about the fact that the Georgian snipers, we saw that the Estonian foreign minister admitted that the Georgian snipers who were shooting people at the Euromaidan protests were not tied to the Ukrainian government, and it was, the West that was putting these people up to commit these crimes. There's ample evidence that this is what took place, and it was the West behind the 2014 illegal coup of the Ukrainian government that was democratically elected. But after that, Ukraine lost its sovereignty. This is the last thing I'll say. And Sarah, as you're going to see throughout the entirety of this conversation, is just going to say anything that I claim is a conspiracy and whatnot, but or conspiracy theory. But the fact is, it's conspiracy fact. I mean, I'm coming armed with the facts. I can show you the people behind this. I can show you the things that they've said. I can show you the money that was put into this project. All Sarah has is just coming out here and saying that it's a crazy conspiracy theory.
Okay. Sarah, I'm going to give you, you were attacked personally by Jackson. I'm going to give you 30 seconds. You don't have to respond to it. If you want to respond to what he said, go ahead.
I'll just say Yanukovych left on his own accord.
That's not true.
Yanukovych left because...
Hold on, Jackson. Let her finish. Just let her finish.
It's a lie.
The people...
Yanukovych...
No, that's fine. I don't know what's the truth in that. I'm not a Ukrainian expert, but each of you will have time to talk. The people will decide. Sarah, go ahead.
Yanukovych left on his own. The idea that a non-state actor, he brought up George Soros, but that any non-state actor is involved in policy decisions for the United States would actually cut at the idea that the United States acts with this hand of God in these situations. And when it comes to me personally, I have no comment to push back on because we're not here to talk about me. We're here to talk about the fact that Ukraine is a sovereign nation in charge of its own destiny, pushing back against the imperialistic, colonialistic tendencies of a neighbor that terroristically invaded them.
Okay. Sarah, next question
wait.
is...
I'm going to respond to that. So Sarah said that Yanukovych, what was the exact phrasing you used for that?
Left on his own.
Left on his own. Okay, so Yanukovych left on his own. So let's just get the facts straight here. The procedure for impeachment in Ukraine, in the Ukrainian parliament, was not followed. Both constitutional and Supreme Courts in Ukraine were not involved in the removal of Yanukovych. You need to have 3/4 of parliament needed to vote for an impeachment of a president in Ukraine, and that was Yanukovych. Out of 450 deputies, 338 would have had to vote for impeachment, but only 328 deputies voted for his impeachment. I'm not good at math, but that's 10 votes short, and I think everyone understands that that's not 3/4 of the 3/4 majority you need to impeach someone. So the Ukrainian parliament voted for the new speaker to become the interim president after that. Again, this is all being done illegally because they didn't get the votes required to actually impeach the president. And then Alexander Turchinov called on the creation of a new government. At this point in time, Yanukovych had left for Lviv because of the fact that his own private residence was under violent seizure by these terrorists and these Nazis in Ukraine. So he left to Ukraine's second largest city and was still in Ukraine while this violent coup was taking place and while these defectors in the Ukrainian government called for a new government to be formed. So no, this was not a legitimate seizure of power. This was an illegal takeover while Yanukovych was still in the country.
All right, Sarah, you're going to have a chance to respond to that, and I'm also going to parlay this into the next question that we have. I'm going to move it up since I'm trying to flow with what you guys are saying. Jackson has made a couple references to Ukraine and Nazis. First off, what is your take on the prior president leaving, with Jackson just said? And as you're there now, what is your comment on the fact that there have been statements by Jackson and others that Ukraine either sympathizes with or has Nazis well within its ranks?
Regarding Yanukovych, since I like to deal with facts, Lviv is not the second largest city in Ukraine. That would be Kharkiv in 2014. And Yanukovych chose to abandon his post as president He chose to go to the Russian Federation. He chose to not stay and push back. I'm not here to talk about what the Rada chose. I'm talking about
that's the only
Yanukovych.
legal impeachment you can have of the president.
Hold on, Jackson. Let her speak.
Again, I'm stating that Yanukovych fled instead of pushing back against what you're stating. I'm not here to talk about the Rada's
actions. He was
actions.
still in the country, though, while they voted to overturn the government.
But he gave up power. But Yanukovych chose to give up power instead of
when
leading.
Did he do that? Because he didn't do that, and you're making that up.
When he fled to Russia.
He was still in the country when the far right-wing nationalists said that they were going to create a new government after they failed to impeach him.
But if the government was so illegal, Yanukovych would have pushed back against it. Instead, he ran.
Yanukovych. So you've changed your argument now. Now you're saying now.
All right, guys, hold on.
I said left.
People. Here we go.
We're going in a back and forth now. This is completely fine.
Crypto.
You're stopping the conversation when we're in a perfectly fine back and forth. So first,
okay, but we're talking about the Ukraine war. We're not talking about 2014.
What do you want me to say?
Well, Jackson, if you're going to threaten me, leave. Then that's up to you, dude. I am here to moderate a debate between you two, which is about the Ukraine war.
We're in a back and forth, and you're about to change the conversation to something. I don't even know what you're about to change the conversation to.
No, Jackson, you're the only one that hasn't followed any rules yet, and we want to hear you. We want to give you this time.
Okay, here's what I'll do. You both have 60 seconds to finish up the prior president, which we're not here to talk about today. We made it very clear that this was going to be about the Ukraine war in the United States.
You don't want to talk about the context that led to the situation. I mean, this is the preeminent point.
Well, we already
I want to talk about the war.
Jackson,
this is the preeminent point
go ahead.
that led to the
Jackson,
situation.
just let me finish for a second.
This is why I don't do debates with stupid fucking moderators like yourself, because you interrupt right when we're in the middle of the heart of the conversation. So, Sarah, you said initially that he fled Ukraine and that this was the reason why, it didn't matter that there was this illegal impeachment that didn't get the votes.
I said initially he left Ukraine.
Okay, well,
I didn't use the word flee.
I said left Ukraine. Now you're saying that actually the reason why this illegal impeachment and the overthrow of his government was justified was because Yanukovych didn't put up a fight?
Again, he chose to leave on his own accord. He didn't leave because the United States pushed him out.
How do you reckon the fact that this move from Alexander Turchinov took place when he called to create the new government? How do you reckon with the fact that Yanukovych was still in Ukraine when that happened?
I would suggest that if Yanukovych was interested, he would have attempted to make a move against these usurpers, as you're claiming that they are, instead of running away to Russia when he understood that he had been found out to be a Russian agent.
Do you think that the negotiations with Yulia Tanyabuk prior to the violent overthrow in which they were going to create a coalition government did not qualify as an effort to attempt to maintain, a system of governance between the warring factions?
Again, I'm not discussing negotiations. I'm not discussing votes that took place. I'm stating clearly.
You just said that he didn't make an effort to try and establish the government.
He fled. You can put it in any particular way. Yanukovych decided to leave Ukraine, and a new government had to step in.
He didn't leave Ukraine.
Once Yanukovych created it.
He did not.
He did. He went to Lviv, and then he went to...
And they created the new government while he was in Lviv.
And if I was going to be Donald Trump and I went to Bedminster, all of a sudden somebody says in Washington, D.C., this is now my government. Does that make it my government in 2017? No, Donald Trump would have come back to Washington and said, no, this is my government.
Okay, but in this hypothetical, is Donald Trump, is the White House under a violent seizure? Is there violence out in the streets? Is there complete overthrow of the courts and everything like that after a failed coup? I mean, this is a completely different situation.
When you guys want to get back to the debate, let me know.
Is this not a debate?
And to answer your question, Crypto, to answer your question regarding the far right, I think we can look and say that with all the votes that went towards the, quote, far right parties in Ukraine, it still didn't tally what the AfD received in Germany or what some of the far right parties have received in other European nations. This notion of there being a Nazi infiltration in Ukraine is false. The idea that Nazis run anything in Ukraine is false, simply because there is not a huge problem with the far right in Ukraine, and there is not a Nazi problem in Ukraine. And we can look at the votes that have taken place to see how negligible amount of support there was for the far right, to the point that in the 2019 elections, the far right completely fell out of government.
Okay, but after the coup, was Andrei Parubiy not the Speaker of the Parliament? I mean, he was the co-founder of Svoboda and Patriots of Ukraine, which eventually grew into the Azov Battalion, and he was the leader of Parliament for like 5 years.
And just so we know, is that person a Nazi or not?
Andrei Parubiy, the founder of the Azov Battalion, yes.
Okay. Sarah, what's your response to that, if any?
My response is that the propaganda from the Russian Federation, which kicked into overdrive regarding Nazis in Ukraine in 2014, you can see the spikes in social media and in articles written, clearly was able to penetrate a vast part of the American consciousness when it came to those who associate with and have the same beliefs as Jackson. And again, I can't try to disprove conspiracy. I can only speak for facts. And the facts are that there is no problem with Nazis in Ukraine, specifically by looking at the vote totals since the founding of Ukraine as a independent nation in 1990.
Well, just to jump in here, I mean, the facts show that Andrei Parubiy was the leader of the parliament for 5 years, from 2014 to 2019, and he was the founder.
Okay, I'm sorry. Listen,
I'm not. This is so ridiculous. So Sarah gets to say something and I don't.
No,
I
just let Sarah talk about how there's no Nazis in Ukraine, and now I'm going to respond. Why can't I respond?
You can respond.
Okay, I'm going to respond now. Okay, thank you. So Andrei Parubiy, she says that there's there's not a Nazi problem in Ukraine. Andrei Parubiy, like I just said, he led the Euromaidan protest. He was the speaker of the second to last parliament, which was 2014 to 2019. You know, he was the leader of the parliament. He was the founder of the Azov Battalion, which is a Nazi Azov battalion. He was the leader of the Society to Erect the Stefan Bandera Monument. And Parubiy considers Bandera the most important person in Ukrainian history. That's his own quote there. The most important person in Ukrainian history is Stefan Bandera. And he says that he's a positive figure because of the fact that he wants to erect a monument in his honor. So he was also the founder of the far-right Social National Party, which he claimed was the, quote, last hope of the white race of humankind as such of Ukraine, which this party was inspired by, of course, Germany's Nazi party. And lastly, I'll say that you have people like Andrei Belitsky, who also from 2014 to 2019, I believe those years, was in the Verkhovna Rada as well. He was the first commander of the Azov Battalion, and he professed his support for, quote, the crusade of white nations of the world against the Semitic-led subhumans. So he was the nationalist far-right politician and leader of the political party National Corps. So I don't understand how Sarah could say that any of this is not a Nazi issue when literally the leaders of the country and still very powerful figures in the country are well-known Nazis, and they profess their love for Stefan Bandera. And I could go on and on and on with more and more people, but I'm not going to.
Let me say this.
Mark, hold on. Hold on. I got to bring Sarah back up. She dropped out.
Yeah.
Okay. Mark, go ahead real quick.
Okay, Jackson and Sarah. Okay, Jackson, we want to be in charge for a minute here. Okay, it is our space, so we're being extremely courteous to you, even when you go on.
Listen. I'm being courteous to you. I'm being courteous to you that I let you guys host this debate. I could have done this debate on my own. I don't give a fuck about who's hosting this debate, any of that shit.
Mark,
you want to cut me off every 30 seconds after Sarah gets a minute to speak?
Jackson, we're not cutting you off. There's 600 people in here. We are letting you speak. I think everyone will say we're letting you speak. No one's cutting you off. I'm just trying to move on to the next topic.
You just admitted you cut me off, and then when I griped about it, you let me speak. So are you cutting me off or are you not cutting me off? Are you lying or are you not?
No, I'm not cutting you off. Whatever games you're playing with Sarah are not going to work on me. I'm not cutting you off.
You just said that you were cutting me off, and then you let me speak when I brought it up. So let's continue the debate.
Okay, let's continue the debate. Let's talk about money. The U.S. has sent an extraordinarily large amount of money over and over and over again to Ukraine. That's just the facts of what it is. They've sent a lot of money over to Ukraine. We'll start with Jackson, and then we'll go over to Sarah. Should the U.S. have sent the money in the past, and should they be sending this new, I think it's like, I don't know what it is. I saw it on the news. I think a $1.5 trillion package between arms and money to Ukraine. What role should the U.S. be playing? Should they be sending arms and gear and weapons and money to Ukraine? Jackson, go ahead. You'll have, it's 3:47. You'll have until 3:51. Go ahead.
No, we should be sending nothing to Ukraine. We should be trying to negotiate peace deals. And we should have done that with the Minsk Accords and the Minsk II Accords. But as German officials recently came out and noted publicly, that was all done in an attempt to give Ukraine more time to prepare for this proxy war that they've been planning for years. So this has been a plan of the West for many years. You can look back at people like Lindsey Graham, who went and visited the Azov battalion and said that we're going to get you what you need to fight Russia over here so we don't have to fight them in the United States. This has been long since planned, and publicly since February 24th, we've given them $120 billion, but privately, behind closed doors, those secret CIA, black funds, we've been giving them much, much, much more. So I don't understand this. I don't understand why we're supporting this Nazi terrorist thug Zelensky. I don't understand why we're supporting his regime. I don't understand why we're doing this other than we have a group of incompetent leaders that are trying in a desperate attempt to maintain global Western hegemonic control. They're trying to take down Russia, and Russia is, slowly but surely defeating them in this attritional war. This has been absolutely devastating for Ukraine. You've got like 40% of the country that doesn't have guaranteed electrical and Wi-Fi infrastructure. You've got 120,000 Ukrainians probably that have been killed so far. You've got, it's devastated the country. You've got obviously the industrial hubs of Ukraine have been taken by Russia already. You've got probably close to 100,000, if not more, square kilometers of Ukraine that have been seized by the Russians. And it's only going to continue from here. They're going to take Odessa. They're going to take Mykolaiv. They'll probably cut Ukraine off from, the coast, as long as the West continues to try and escalate the war rather than bring about peace.
All right, Jackson, thank you. Sarah, go ahead.
The idea that we are giving Ukraine money is actually a fallacy. A lot of what is coming to the Ukrainians are in the form of drawdown. What is announced, but the idea that we are just handing over the Ukrainians money is one that's simply not true. Furthermore, as long as the strong bipartisan support continues in both the House of Representatives, the United States Senate, and within the executive branch, then we should continue to give support to Ukraine at every level of civilian and military that's requested, due to the fact that we are the greatest republic in the history of the world, meaning the United States. And we have these representatives in power, representatives of the people, of the taxpayers. And clearly there's still that feeling of support within the U.S. Congress and within the executive branch to continue to give aid. So as long as the leaders in our nation choose to do so, then I support it because that's why they're in office. And for the rest of his statement, I can't even respond to, simply because, again, it jumps into falsehoods, conspiracies, and a lot of gobbledygook coming from his mouth that doesn't stand up to actual fact-based reality.
Okay, then challenge me with the facts.
I just answered the facts. We're not sending them money.
You can't counter my gobbledygook conspiracy theories that are coming out of my mouth.
Yeah.
Because they
Russia is not taking Odessa. Russia does not have the industrial parts of Ukraine. Those are two ideas not based in fact.
What do you think the DPR, LPR, Mariupol are? What do you think that is? That was the industrial.
It doesn't make up the vast majority. Thank you for acknowledging that the DPR, LPR, and Mariupol belong to Ukraine.
So the Russians
I
don't have
appreciate
it
you
yet. Okay.
acknowledging
Okay. The Russians, they're temporarily occupying it. My bad.
illegally occupying those areas. Correct. So thank you.
Yes, illegally occupying. Another question. Do you want me to respond to that, or what do we want to do next?
If you want to respond, you can. Otherwise, I have a question.
Well, I mean, I'll just respond a little bit because, like, I was just so floored by the first statement that Sarah made. You know, we're not sending money to Ukraine. That was what you said, right?
I said that our aid is coming in the form of drawdown, so we're not sending significant money.
Well, you started off by saying we're not technically sending money to Ukraine.
I didn't say that. I said that the vast majority of
because I'm pretty sure the 600 plus people in here all heard the same thing.
Yeah, I said the vast majority of aid is coming in the form of drawdowns, which are weapons that are obsolete and sitting in storage in the United States, and they're assigned a value. They've already been paid for.
So we're just giving them away. We're not paying the MIC for the weapons. We're just taking them, and the Raytheon and Boeing are like, oh, here's some free weapons. Have fun with it. We're just going to drain our stockpiles. Have fun with it. You're saying that the taxpayers are not. So where's the 120 billion? Where's the portion of that that's set aside for weapons purchases? Where's that going, if not to the military-industrial complex?
Are we talking about private enterprise, or are we talking about the support of the United States to Ukraine? Again, you talked about NGOs, you're talking about the military-industrial complex.
The United States government doesn't produce the weapons we're shipping over there. That would be private enterprise, the military-industrial complex, yes.
And the items that are sitting in drawdown were going to be replaced one way or the other and had nothing to do with Ukraine.
They have everything to do with Ukraine. I mean, we've sent them over there. Why would we not use those weapons to protect our own country?
Because they've already been deemed obsolete by the Pentagon and congressional leaders.
If they've been deemed obsolete by the Pentagon and congressional leaders, why are we sending them over to Ukraine?
Because Ukraine's able to beat Russia with our obsolete weapons.
Oh, okay. So they're obsolete, but they're going to take down one of the strongest militaries in the world with obsolete weapons?
That shows that Russia really isn't one of the strongest militaries in the world, and that's another fallacy that just came out of your mouth.
Okay, fallacy or not, if they're defeating Russia so bad, why have they lost about 100,000 more troops, and why have they lost around 100,000 square kilometers of their territory that you say is being temporarily illegally occupied?
You just answered the second part, so I don't have to do it again.
No, but if they're defeating the Russians, why are they letting the Russians temporarily illegally occupy 100,000 square kilometers?
We've already taken back more than 40% of what's been taken since the full-scale invasion began in February.
You think that February they've taken back more than 40%?
Since what was taken since February 24th, yes.
Have you seen the Ukrainian-backed Live UA maps? Because Live UA maps paints a very different picture from what you're saying.
I base it on what the reality is within this country, not on Live UA maps. And then to answer your first question,
Live UA maps, though, it shows that only 2% of the territory that Russia's occupied has been retaken by the Ukrainians.
I said since February 24th.
Yes.
I said since February 24th.
Yes.
So more than 40% of what was taken since February 24th has been clawed back.
Are you claiming that Kiev was taken on February 24th or something?
Bucha, Irpin, Sumy, Kharkiv were all occupied by the Russians, and they were pushed out.
That is not 40% of the territory that's occupied or been occupied by Russia. You're delusional.
Kherson, absolutely.
No, it's not. Kherson, Russia still controls. I believe it's either 40 or 60% of Kherson, the oblast.
Again, if you look at the entire map from what Russia had at their peak of their illegal occupation after their full-scale invasion of Ukraine, they have lost approximately 40% of it.
That's not
Ukrainians.
And Ukraine doesn't even have direct control of Kherson City anymore. They lost that. They're losing Zaporozhye. There's offensives in Zaporozhye.
I was just in Kherson City for 5 days.
They just lost Soledar.
Jackson, I was literally just in Kherson City for 5 days.
They're about to be fully encircled.
There was no Russians there.
What are you saying?
I luckily don't have to answer anything further because, again, I can say from on the ground knowledge and backed by
You're
pictures
making up.
that the
So
Russians don't
let's.
have Kherson.
Can we pull up? Can
I'm
we
not.
pull
I
up
was
live
there.
UA maps because you're literally making up statistics right now.
No, for one thing, you just made up a statement that I can rebut because 24 hours ago I was in Kherson.
You guys do not have full control of Kherson City.
100%, we have full control of Kherson City.
Do not.
The Russians are nowhere near it.
No, you do not. There might be people in Kherson City, but that doesn't mean that the Ukrainian military can have full control of it. Civilians aren't, evacuated from every single city that's taken. I mean, there were still civilians in the midst of the fighting in Soledar, within Soledar, and we all know how bad Soledar was. So no, that doesn't mean anything because the Russians have indirect fire control of Kherson City, as do the Ukrainians. There's no territorial control of it. What makes you think that just because there's soldiers LARPing like yourself of a given military in a given city means that you have control over it? Okay, so Russian soldiers are currently in Bakhmut. Does that mean that Russia has control of Bakhmut?
I'm saying that there are no Russian soldiers anywhere on the mainland of Kherson City.
Okay, Russians right now can fire, or Ukrainians right now can fire at. Ukrainians can fire at Mariupol right now if they wanted to. Ukrainians can fire at Crimea if they wanted to. Does that mean that the Russians, as you put it, have full control of these regions? Because I'm assuming that you'd argue that
Russia's choosing to engage in ongoing and consistent terrorism against the liberated city of Kherson.
Okay, let's kind of tailor that into my next question that I'll bring up. As you guys were talking about the cities and what was controlled, let's kind of go back to the start of this war. And I'll go to Sarah first, since Jackson was, I think I started with you, Jackson, last time. So Sarah, it's 3:59. You'll go to 4:02. Does Russia have a claim to eastern Ukraine, and if so, where?
Russia has no claim to any land within Ukraine that came about in the 1991 separation from the Soviet Union. The 1991 borders are the borders of Ukraine. That includes Crimea, all of the Donbass, all of the southern territories, and all of the northern areas that border the Russian Federation. So no, they have no claim to it, nor do the people want them in there. Every vote that has taken place that has been a free and open vote without the influence of the Russian Federation has shown over and over again that the Russians are not wanted in Ukraine and they have no claim to Ukraine. Ukraine is a sovereign state that chose its borders in 1991, and those borders are going to be returned yet again.
Jackson, it's all yours.
Well, the reason, and I know, I thought it was silly that you guys were saying, oh, this presidential matter in 2014 is not important. It is extremely important that we look at the context of the situation, because in 2014, the Ukrainian government that was overthrown and the new government that came into form after Alexander Tuchinov called for the creation of a new government while Viktor Yanukovych was still in the country after they failed to impeach him. They were 10 votes short of a legal impeachment in the Verkhovna Rada. Ukraine gave up its sovereignty at that point in time. I mean, you still have the leader of the country that is there, and you have an illegal overthrow that's backed by George Soros and Western powers and individuals like Victoria Nuland. At that point in time, the sovereignty of Ukraine was thrown into the wind. Now we're seeing something very different take place, though. So we also saw in 2014 that the people of the Donbass in Donetsk and Lugansk voted to become independent people's republics. We saw that the Lugansk population, 96.2% of them voted to become an independent people's republic. And in Donetsk, I believe it was like 89%, 89.07% of them voted to become an independent people's republic. And, this is, so Sarah's going to make up some claim without any evidence whatsoever and saying, oh my God, this was Russian influence in the elections. But let me just pose the question to everyone in the stream right now. If you lived in a region of the country, let's say that you live in Texas and you support Donald Trump and you see that Donald Trump is illegally taken out of power. They didn't meet the qualifications for an impeachment and his ouster, and they violently overtake the government. And then let's say it was Nancy Pelosi violently overtakes the government, and then Nancy Pelosi starts sicking violent Nazi, paramilitary groups on your community in Texas. Is it really all that crazy to assume that your fellow compatriots in Texas might vote to become an independent state or an independent people's republic? No, it's not. And that's what we saw take place in the DPR and the LPR. And while they were trying to fight to become, independent people's republics, Putin, for the past 8 years, didn't even recognize them as such. He did not recognize them as independent people's republics until February 24th or whatever, 25th, around there, of 2022. In addition to that, we saw that over 15,000 civilians in the DPR and the LPR within the Donbass were killed by these Ukrainian paramilitary thugs like the Azov Battalion. Okay, so we saw them wage a campaign of violence as these people were trying to become independent. And that's what eventually brought us to the situation we're in today. Many people in Russia were calling, and this is the last thing I'll say, many people in Russia were calling on Putin to go and save the people of the Donbass who were being slaughtered by the Nazi thugs for the past 8 years. And Putin waited until February 24th, and I think he now understands that that was the biggest mistake, one of the biggest mistakes of his life. He admitted it as such. I think many people see that, the KPRF was correct in calling on Putin to do this years and years ago, to go protect the Donbass.
Sarah, we'll go back to you for 30 to 60 seconds. Go ahead.
All I heard was blah, 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 Soros, blah, blah, blah,
why
Nuland.
Don't you fucking
blah,
listen
blah,
to what I'm saying and respond to the points I make?
Blah, 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 96.2% of fictitious numbers that were put out by
15,000 people dead, and you're saying it's blah, blah, blah.
by the
15,000
Russians.
innocent civilians dead.
Blah, blah, blah,
15,000
if that's even the number. There's no numbers that are coming out of the Donbass ever since the illegal invasion of that region and that area of Ukraine that can actually be verified. Why? Because it's being occupied by a terrorist regime backed by the Russian Federation.
So everything I just said was prior to that.
You also said blah, 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 Nuland, blah, 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 Soros. So again, I turned it off because I don't
engage in a very riveting debate. So we have a transgender LARPer in the Ukrainian military that's saying that everything I say is just blah, blah, blah. Why don't you actually try and refute the points I made, such as the Donbass and Lugansk, or the Donetsk and Lugansk referendums, or the 15,000 dead civilians in the Donbass from 2014 to 2022 killed by these Nazi, military thugs? Why don't you respond to some of those points rather than just say it's blah, blah, blah?
Fine, I'll respond by saying nothing you stated was based in fact or reality. Therefore, I can't refute.
Counter it with your own reality. What really happened?
We don't understand what happened because Russia obfuscated.
You don't understand what happened. That's correct. You don't understand what happened. Tell me what actually
happened.
We don't.
Russia decided to terrorize the Donbass. And we had been attempting to peacefully negotiate the settlements. President Zelensky came to office with an idea of bringing peace and a conclusive ending to the occupation illegally by the Russian terrorists. And Putin decided to end that peace and actually end Russia's own sovereignty by invading Ukraine. And now they're being beaten by obsolete weapons from the United States. That's the facts.
If that's the fact, then why is it, a few points here, why is it, again, that the Ukrainian Nazi thugs were responsible for killing, again, 15,000 civilians up until 2014 to 2022?
Because there's no Nazi thugs running around in any sort of numbers to carry out any sort of killings to the level that you're suggesting.
I let you talk, so let me talk. So I'm going to say, I'm going to play, your game here, and we'll say, no, there's no Nazi thugs whatsoever. There's not, entire, battalions and divisions of men running around with tattoos of Stefan Bandera and swastikas. That's definitely not happening. But let's say there's no Nazis whatsoever. The OSCE still does recognize, which is, the Independent Security and Cooperation Organization for Europe. They were doing their internal reviews and reports in the Donbass. They still recognize that 15,000 civilians were killed by Ukrainian heavy artillery from 2014 to 2022. So you haven't been able to counter that point, but you said that Russian terrorism was being waged on the people of the Donbass. The OSCE says just the opposite. The OSCE also says that in the lead up to the February 24th invasion, guess what was happening? It wasn't the Russians that were increasing their shelling of the regions of the Donbass. It was the Ukrainians increasing their shelling dramatically of the Donbass. And the OSCE, again, has come out and said this as such. And also there was internal documents leaked from, the offices of Zaluzhny that said that the Ukrainians were preparing a full-scale offensive into the Donbass that would make the situation with the increased shelling in the lead up to the February 24th SMO beginning look like children's play. It would have looked like theater compared to what they were going to do to those innocent civilians that they've been slaughtering for years in the Donbass. So do you want to counter any of those points that even the OSCE backs?
I just want to point out that I've never seen a situation where somebody's managed to two-side their own story. I'm glad to see you're a supporter, apparently, of the OSCE. And I'm so stunned by this that I can't respond any further to the fake numbers that were thrown out, except to state that the Russian-backed invasion of the Donbass led directly to the deaths of those people who have died in the Donbass between 2014 and 2022. It begins and ends with the Russian Federation and their desire for bloodshed and their desire for this colonialistic, imperialistic invasion of a neighboring sovereign country. And I'm glad to see you do try to support, though, international bodies such as the OSCE. It gives me hope for you, Jackson.
But you're not going to counter any of the data I brought up from the OSCE, which shows that they killed 15,000.
Just countered it by telling you that it's at the hands of the Russian Federation.
No.
The Ukrainians have slaughtered nobody.
I'm trying to play your game here. I'm trying to, go along with the sources that
I just said the Ukrainians have slaughtered nobody.
The Ukrainians have slaughtered nobody.
Correct.
So the OSCE was wrong?
I'm stating that it was created and caused by the Russian Federation-backed illegal occupation of the Donbass and an attempt to reestablish control over the sovereignty of the Donbass, which belongs to Ukraine.
But Sarah, everything I was just talking about was before the so-called occupation of the illegal occupation of the Donbass. I was talking about the genocidal killings of the people in the Donbass from 2014 to 2022, which the OSCE was.
The Donbass became occupied in 2014.
That's complete bogus. That's complete bullshit.
No, it's not.
How? Wait, Sarah. If the Donbass became occupied in 2014, then why are you saying why were you saying just a few minutes ago that the illegal occupation began when Russia invaded on February 24th?
I said the full-scale invasion.
So what's your proof that Russia was occupying the Donbass? I'll give it to you that the Russians were at certain points in small scale supporting the Donbass fighters. They were, giving them artillery and whatnot in a small capacity, but it was no occupation.
The DPR and LPR, in the sense that it even exists, because the DPR and LPR are illegal entities that don't have any factual standing in law, were fully backed formations of the Russian Federation, which included Russian paramilitary on the ground with the DPR and LPR that led directly to the deaths of 15,000 innocent Ukrainians at the hands of the Russian Federation.
So wait, so you're saying that the 15,000 deaths are responsible there? It's Russia that did that?
I've said that 4 times now.
So you don't like the OSCE. You counter what they say.
I'm stating that any responsibility for the deaths in the Donbass from 2014 to today was due to the Russian-backed occupation, illegally, of the Donbass by rebels.
Okay, I'm glad we're clear here, because that would make no sense if you have innocent children in kindergarten class that are in innocent women in hospitals in the Donbass that are getting blown up by Ukrainian artillery supplies. It makes no sense that, somehow the Donbass militiamen were killing them when we can confirm, and the OSCE has confirmed, that it was Ukrainian artillery, that was heavy artillery, that was being launched in there and killing these civilians. So I'm glad to
the fact that the fact that this illegal occupation utilized human shields.
Shut the fuck up.
Well, Jackson, relax, guys.
Shut the fuck up.
The fact that
I'm glad that we can come around to the point that Sarah does not support the findings of the OSCE. I'm glad we can come around to that point.
The fact that it uses human shields to engage in their terrorism is something that has to be addressed in the future in a war crimes tribunal. The fact that the DPR and LPR, in whatever form they exist, engage in false flags. The idea that any deaths that took place in the Donbass are not the responsibility of Russia is a flaw in the findings. And in fact, when the full truth comes out,
how could you ever make that argument when literally each and every day the Ukrainians are shelling Donetsk in the Donbass? Like, how could you ever make that argument?
Again, it would end tomorrow if the Russian Federation and their illegal militias, including those behind the LPR and DPR, put down their arms and return to the 1991 borders. President Zelensky.
Okay, wait. So we're admitting now that the Ukrainians are shelling the Donbass?
I'm stating that there would be no more fighting in the Donbass, period, or the ability to use civilians as human shields the way the Russian Federation does if they left all parts of Ukraine.
So the Russians were never in Ukraine. They were not occupying Ukraine from 2014 to 2022, and the negotiations of the Minsk Accords show that to be the fact. I mean, it bears out that they were not occupying it if the Minsk Accords were being negotiated. So why
you just backed off on your own statement that Russia did take part in the occupation through weapons and other means?
No, that's occupation.
You said that. It was on the recording.
Yeah, it's on recording, but you're being a fucking retard. I literally just said that they weren't occupying it, but in a small capacity at some points throughout the 8 years of fighting, they did provide them with some weapons. That's not an occupation. If that's an occupation, then the United States is occupying Ukraine. Is the United States occupying Ukraine because we send them weapons?
We don't have U.S. troops on the ground here. The Russians have have troops on the ground in the Donbass and have since 2014.
Okay, well, the United Kingdom has troops on the ground there, and so are they? The
United Kingdom does not have troops on the ground in Ukraine. There are no foreign military on the ground in Ukraine except at the embassies, and the embassies are sovereign territory.
Well, that's not true.
All right. Next question we have for you guys, Jackson. I'll start with you. We started with Sarah on the last one. Has the length of the war damaged Russia's reputation as a powerful army?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Sure. Has the length of the war, we're going on, it seems around 10 months now, has the length of the war damaged Russia's reputation at all?
Yeah, I'll answer the question, but here you have it. Leading British Army general has admitted that the British Royal Marine troops have been deployed on discrete operations inside Ukraine throughout the aggression of Russia. That's coming here from your favorite Western media sources. So do we say that that's not true? I mean, like so now you counter the OSCE and you counter what's going on, what Reuters is admitting. Also, we all know that there's British SAS troops that have been training Ukrainians in and around the Kiev Oblast region. So, but I'll give it to you. Whatever, they're not actually fighting there allegedly, but we do know that they've been doing quote unquote discrete operations throughout Ukraine. So, is that not happening now, or are we living in reality still?
I don't view Reuters as a fair and impartial news source, and without having that in front of me, I can't comment. But unless it's the general's name attached to it, I would give it even less credence. And if it's a retired general, I'd give it even further pushback. And in fact, there's nobody fighting from a foreign military except for the Russians on this land.
Well, the head, it's not just a general; it's the former head of the Marines, the Royal Navy Marines, and his name is McGowan.
You just said former. There you go. So speculation is not something I deal in. Conspiracy is not something I deal in. I deal in fact when it comes to Ukraine's fight for liberation and liberty and this attempt to push the Russians out of a sovereign nation.
So Lieutenant General Robert McGowan is lying?
Well, we have Mike Flynn in the United States who lies all the time. So unless I knew more about this retired lieutenant general, I can't speak further about it. I know he's not on the ground here.
Okay, well, the claim is 350 Marines and 45 Commando Group were deployed at short notice from the depths of dark North Norwegian winter to evacuate the British embassy to Kiev in Poland. Then in April, they returned to the country to reestablish a diplomatic mission, providing protection to critical personnel. In addition to that, they've been participating and deployed for discrete operations additionally inside Ukraine. So it sounds like they're not just doing diplomatic missions when he says that there was other discrete operations that they're referring to here. But again, we're not living in reality, and this never happened. And the Lieutenant General of the Royal Marines is lying. So let's move on to the next question that you said. And Reuters is reporting this; they're lying too. So the next question was: did Russia's standing decline throughout this special military operation or something?
Has the length of the war damaged Russia's reputation?
No, Russia has become incredibly more based throughout the special military operation. They've gained support from, countless more Americans. 2/3 of the global population live in countries that are either neutral to Russia right now surrounding the situation in Ukraine or supportive of the situation in Ukraine. We just saw today that new stats came out from Quinnipiac University, which showed that at the start of the invasion, only 7% of Americans felt as though that, there was too much support for Ukraine. Now there's 33% of Americans. There are more Americans who say that we're doing too much for Ukraine than too little for Ukraine. And Russia has been able to also, lift their economy from its knees. The Russian central bank has done an incredible job. Their oil and gas trades are at an all-time high with China, Saudi Arabia, and of course with India, because India is taking all the oil that Russia can no longer directly sell to Europe and is refining it into refined petroleum and selling it to Europe at a higher price. The BRICS bloc, which Russia is one of the leaders in, is expanding with many more important nations like Indonesia and Egypt and Argentina applying for membership. You have the SCO, which is also expanding. Turkey is interested in that. Turkey and Russia have just agreed upon a massive new gas hub plan, and Turkey's announced that they have massive gas reserves that they just publicly announced they found. The African, Union shows that all the African leaders in Africa, with the exception of about 4 or 5, are pro-Russia and anti-Ukraine. They refuse to meet with Zelensky, and they all, lined up to shake Sergei Lavrov's hand. Same thing with Arab Union states. They all went to go meet Lavrov, and none of them supports Ukraine. So globally, Russia is, they've become much more based, and everyone likes them more.
Okay, Sarah, same question. Has the length of the war damaged Russia's reputation?
It's damaged significantly, and you first asked that question, I believe, regarding the military.
Yeah.
Any nation that has to turn to Iran and North Korea for armaments is one that's been shown to not just have a damaged military, but a nearly impotent, useless military that's only able to carry out terrorist acts and hide behind private military contractors because they're not able to advance their nation's causes, however wrong the causes are, utilizing their own military-industrial complex. As for everything else, it has nothing to do with your question, so I'll leave it at that. Russia relies on North Korea and Iran. Yes, it's damaged their reputation greatly.
All right. I think you guys spoke about this, but I want to get into more detail. Are either, and Sarah, I'll start with you. It's 4:21. I'll give you till 4:23. Are either side responsible for war crimes?
The Russian Federation is responsible not only for war crimes, the Russian Federation is responsible for all acts of bloodshed that have taken place within the 1991 borders of Ukraine?
Okay, I'll answer the question, but first, Sarah, I just sent you your favorite media outlet in the world, the Kiev Post, Ukraine's global voice, which claims that, quote, senior British general says Royal Marines deployed in covert ops in Ukraine. So you can read that for yourself. Jay Beecher wrote about that in the Kiev Post, your favorite news outlet. So just wanted to get the record clear in case you also disagree with the Kiev Post and think that the Kiev Post is lying about that. Just like you said, the OSCE was lying about the stats surrounding shelling in the Donbass of innocent civilians from 2014 onward. But the vast majority of war crime. Okay, well, the question is, do you think that either country is responsible for war crimes? Yes, both countries are responsible for war crimes. Obviously, as we all know, the vast majority of war crimes have been committed by the Nazi terrorist regime in Ukraine, acting at the behest of the United States. The war crimes I've seen from the Russians amount to filming POWs, which is a war crime. You're not supposed to film POWs. But the Ukrainians, I mean, we have countless examples, shooting Russian POWs in the knees, watching them bleed out as they crawl for life. We see the innocent attacks on civilians. We see what's going on with the reprisals in towns that the Ukrainians have retaken, such as in Kharkov or such as in Bucha, where we saw, well, there's certain things we're limited about talking about even on Twitter with Elon Musk in power. But, you can look at the videos and see who was walking around and, what patches they were wearing on their military garb as they were firing at maybe civilians, maybe not civilians. That's about as direct as I can be with the, what's going on with censorship. But and then you see what's going on with the Zelensky thuggish regime introducing laws to ban the UOC, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, introducing SBU actions to go and start arresting people in these regions. We've all seen the innocent civilians' war crimes that have been tied up to light posts and trees all throughout Ukraine, and they are tied up with like saran wrap, and then they are sprayed in the face with green antiseptic dye, which causes temporary blindness. So these are just a few of the war crimes committed by the Ukrainians that are very well documented. And I hope that there's a Nuremberg 2.0 to hold all these people accountable. I was talking with the first deputy representative to the United Nations of Russia, Dmitry Polyansky, about this, and he says, yes, we are working on creating a Nuremberg 2.0, essentially like a war crimes tribunal of what's going on. We're working with many nations to participate in this, and it will be done.
Sarah, your response to specifically, if you could respond to some of the comments, which obviously there's a lot of them, but the one that popped out to me was the Ukrainian military shooting at civilians.
Can you hear me? I've been pushed out of the space. Okay, great. Yeah. The Ukrainian military has only shot at soldiers of the Russian Federation and those who have pretended or utilized the guise of being civilians to carry out their war against the people of Ukraine.
So I just want to be very, very clear here. International law does not permit war criminality such as crimes of aggression, crimes against humanity, or any other war crime. The international law does not permit war crimes in the face of even if you view it as an illegal invasion. You cannot.
I said dressing crimes. I said civilians, soldiers dressed as civilians. I would like to ask, throw one thing out there. I'm very interested. Since you're engaged with, no, hold on. Since you're engaged with Russian government officials, have you ever signed up? Have you signed up for your foreign agent registration?
Guys, there's 800 people in here. Come on.
Yeah, question, whatever. It's whatever. So I'm going to talk now because I let you talk. So,
Crypto, can you mute him? Because didn't I have time for my response?
And then you can. No, you just talked.
Jackson, you talked. Jackson, can she just at least finish she was saying?
It just talked, and now I'm going to talk.
When she was done
just
talking,
said something, and now I'm going to talk.
Yeah,
because
you don't get to choose when she's done talking. She was not done.
it was done talking.
I wasn't done talking. I was answering the questions that was posited to me in the follow-up.
Okay, whatever.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Good.
My final question on that, because what jumped out to me about the war crimes and crimes is the crime Jackson Hinkle is engaged in as a foreign agent of the Russian Federation, which he just admitted to in his talks with the first deputy of the United Nations for Russia. And I was just wondering if he's filed his Foreign Agent Registration Act paperwork yet with the Department of Justice. I'm just throwing that out there.
Oh, that's a very, very good point. So if someone from country A talks to someone in country B, then you're immediately an unregistered foreign agent. So does that mean that Joe Biden is an unregistered foreign agent and he's actually committing an impeachable offense because he's talking both publicly and privately to Ukrainian officials?
He's a member of the United States government, so unless you're an undercover FBI,
That's why the
unless you're an undercover FBI agent,
that's why the
unless you're a Fed boy.
That's why hey, I let you talk. That's why the allegation is all the more serious, Sarah, because if he's committing illegal acts as president of the United States, let's be very, very particular and precise about this. Someone should file articles of impeachment if that's illegal.
I believe Marjorie Taylor Greene is going to file articles of impeachment. If something happened with classified documents, any party that committed crime should be held responsible. And
you're literally retarded if you think it's a crime to talk to people in another country. That's the silliest thing I've ever heard.
I think it's a crime to lobby on behalf of a foreign government.
Is it lobbying if I invite another sovereign person onto my YouTube show and have a conversation with them about geopolitics? Is that lobbying now?
It can absolutely be construed as such, unless you're an undercover FBI agent, which in the way you behave, I sometimes wonder if you are.
You know what's actually a criminal undertaking is the fact that I believe you're an American citizen. Are you just an American citizen or do you have dual citizenship? I actually don't know.
I'm an American citizen.
So an American citizen has flown all the way to Ukraine to go fight with Nazi terrorist thugs and join the Ukrainian military. You are a soldier in the Ukrainian military, correct?
I am 100% a soldier in the Ukrainian military.
So are you a registered foreign agent? I'm curious.
Actually, we've looked into this, and as a member of the military, I don't have to register as a foreign agent.
That's perfectly fine. But do you understand how insane it is for you to accuse me of being an unregistered foreign agent because I talked to the deputy permanent representative of the United Nations from Russia on my YouTube show when you are not a registered foreign agent, but you're literally serving in the military? You're not a mercenary, right? You're a soldier in the Ukrainian military. Do you understand?
I'm a soldier in the Ukrainian military.
Yeah. Do you understand how insane that is?
Actually, there's a carve-out in the Foreign Agent Registration Act that allows for members of the military of an allied nation during a war to not have to register as a foreign agent.
But do you understand? I get there's the
carve-out. I understand the rule of law is what I understand.
And where? Okay, so where in Registered Foreign Agents Act does it say that if you talk to someone from another country that you have to register as a foreign agent?
I'm suggesting that you are a foreign agent for the Russian Federation.
But the evidence you provided was that you said that I'm a registered foreign agent because I talked to Dmitry Polyansky.
I'm suggesting that you are a foreign agent of the Russian Federation. Whether you are or not, is not for me to decide. I believe you are a foreign agent of the Russian Federation.
Apparently it is for you to decide because you just decided it. You said that Jackson just admitted that he's an unregistered foreign agent and committing a crime because of the fact that he talked to Dmitry Polyansky on his show, which I get that apparently there's this carve-out that allows you to serve in the Ukrainian military as an American citizen. You're not a Ukrainian citizen. You don't have dual citizenship. But I think the 800 plus people in here right now can all agree upon the fact that regardless of whether you support Russia or Ukraine or whatever, you have no dog in this fight. Serving in the military of a different country is much, 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 much more of an involved position in a given conflict than talking on a YouTube show to a relatively lower level politician when it comes to decision making in said country.
This is exactly what a member of the Russian paid influencer program would be saying. You wouldn't be speaking to Putin. You'd be putting out the messaging through a low-level United Nations operative in an innocuous, lowly rated YouTube show.
Well, that's your opinion, I guess. My lowly rated YouTube show has many, many more followers and viewers than you will ever see in your entire life. But
and that's why I have a full Wikipedia page and tons and tons and tons of coverage from both before my time in Ukraine and after in national press, including Washington Post.
I have 7 Wikipedia pages. Wikipedia dedicated 7 Wikipedia pages to me.
You don't have a Wikipedia entry. That's actually
I do. And actually, Wikipedia gave me an award for being such an outstanding Wikipedia page recipient.
Mm-hmm. What you should be getting an award for is having been able to be a foreign agent of the Russian Federation for this long without being indicted.
That's quite the claim. But the evidence you provided is that I talked to a Russian politician. Meanwhile, you are a transgender American serving in the Ukrainian military. You see the insanity of the claim that you're making right now? I mean, it just... So this debate, I mean, I wanted to continue.
You told me retarded 3 times, and you brought up being trans 4 times.
There's been so many incredible moments throughout this debate. First and foremost, we have me pointing out the fact that you didn't know how the impeachment process works in the Verkhovna Rada, and that Yanukovych was actually ousted in an illegal coup. We have
Yanukovych ran away. Yanukovych fled to his Russian handlers.
We've pointed out the fact that you didn't know that there were Nazis in Ukraine and leading the Verkhovna Rada from 2014 to 2019. We've pointed out the fact that you didn't understand how the Minsk agreements worked. We've pointed out the fact that you don't agree with the OSCE. We've pointed out the fact you don't agree with the Kiev Post. This has been a very fruitful debate, actually. So let's move to the next question. What's the next question?
All right, next question. Sarah, you're up first on this, and there's 2 questions left, guys. First one is, the one of 2, Sarah. It's 4:33. You got till 4:35. Should Ukraine join NATO?
I don't believe Ukraine needs to join NATO. I don't believe Ukraine needs to join the European Union. I believe Ukraine can choose their own destiny because they're a sovereign nation, and that they've shown without being a member of NATO that they were able to not only hold their own against the alleged second strongest military in the world, but they were able to do so utilizing weapons that were deemed obsolete by the United States. So whether Ukraine joins NATO or not is really something that isn't in my purview right now. Ultimately, it's for a decision of the Ukrainian people and NATO as a whole to make after victory takes place, total victory, and a return to the 1991 borders.
All right,
can you repeat the question?
Yes. Should Ukraine join NATO if they can?
I'll answer the question momentarily. But Sarah, you said moments ago that you're not in violation of the Unregistered Foreign Agents Act because what was the reasoning you gave?
Because if you are a member of the military of a allied nation during a time of war, the FARA registration does not apply.
It just so happens that Ukraine doesn't technically by FARA represent a U.S. ally because it's not in NATO. So the FARA exemption that's carved out that you suggest doesn't even exist for Ukraine. So do you know that you're in violation of the Foreign Agents Registration Act?
I can say when I was on Capitol Hill lobbying Congress on behalf of Ukraine, it was the last thing on my mind over any concerns of FARA because I'm not in violation of FARA.
But you are.
But I'm not.
But you are because Ukraine is not a U.S. ally officially.
Ukraine is an ally officially receiving military support from the United States during a time of war. Has nothing to do with
that does not make a country an official U.S. ally. Okay, so does that make Saudi Arabia an official U.S. ally because we're sending them weapons to go slaughter Yemenis? Can I go serve in the Saudi Arabian military without registering as a foreign agent?
I can't speak for what you would do with the Saudi Arabian military.
You can't because you're in violation of FARA.
Again, I'm not. And I can state point blank, I'm not. What I am
But
stating is
far,
asking you, how much
Ukraine
money have you
is not an
received from the
official
Russian
ally.
Federation in advertising dollars and what you've done on your show and through other means of propagating
Sarah,
the interest of Russia?
Sarah, Ukraine, I will give you this. Ukraine is technically a strategic partner of the United States, but per the FARA Act, that does not qualify as an ally. So you actually are in violation of FARA. Did you know that?
Then I look forward to being indicted and going before a jury to discuss my service for the Ukrainian government.
I look forward to that too. But I'm asking you, did you know that you're in violation of FARA?
But again, I'm not in violation of FARA.
But Ukraine is not an ally. It's technically just a strategic partner. It's not in NATO.
I think there could be a suggestion.
But
law does
not dance around in these gray areas. The law is quite clear. It's black and white. If you're an ally, you can serve without being a registered foreign agent. And Ukraine is not an ally. It's a strategic partner. So I just find it so funny. You accuse me of being an unregistered foreign agent
100%.
because I talked to Dmitry Polyansky on my show, but you're actually an unregistered foreign agent that's committing a crime each and every day that you continue to serve in the Ukrainian military, or as I should say, as you continue to LARP in the Ukrainian military as a soldier.
Not just serve in the Ukrainian military, but lobby the United States government on behalf of the Ukrainians. So
you're
again,
admitting to two crimes now.
I would like to understand how much you get paid through the Russian paid influencer program in order to carry out the will of your Russian puppet.
You know what's very interesting, Sarah? I have my views because I see the world clear as day. I've never been paid by any foreign government or any conduit of a foreign government. In fact, I have appeared on, I've appeared on Russian TV. I've appeared on Chinese TV. I've appeared on, not live, but, I've had my clips played on other countries' TVs. And in some instances, like I went on CGTN for a debate about woke culture in the United States. And they said, Jackson, we want to pay you for your time on the show, for coming on and spending your time on the show and debating woke culture in the United States. And I said, I appreciate it, but I'm not going to take your money because I don't take money from sovereign governments. Unlike Sarah right now, who I'm debating, who not only takes money from these sovereign governments that are not allies of the United States, which is in direct violation of the Unregistered Foreign Agents Act, but also
actually what's really also in direct violation of
their military. You serve in their military.
100%, proudly. I've proudly given my loyalty to the Ukrainian government.
Proudly in violation of FARA.
I'm not in violation of FARA, yet you don't have to be paid to be in violation of FARA. So now we know that you aren't just propagating the Russian messaging in the United States, but you're doing it on
the only reason why I brought up the payments is because you said that I'm a recipient of some like Russian. What did you call it? You said the Russian
paid influencer program.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay. So, you've actually pissed me off. So, when this debate started, I know nothing about you and whatever, but you've pissed me off so much. I'm actually going to, seek out how I can try to bring you down through the FARA exemption that you claimed that you were not.
Jackson Hinckley is attempting to bring down Sarah Ashton Cirillo. Jackson.
Yeah, because
I'm glad that
as
you
an American,
as a red,
Sarah, my ancestors, they sailed over on the Mayflower. They came here in 1620. My ancestors fought in the American Revolution. I actually care about this country, and I'm not going to go and take my body and dispose of it for a Nazi terrorist regime like the Zelensky regime in violation of FARA while I'm doing it. So yes, I am going to try and, lead to whatever prosecution might be responsible or, in place for you. And as you violate FARA each and every day. Yeah, I'm going to do that.
Every day that I proudly serve both liberty and liberation.
No, you're not.
I can stand and look at the United States flag and understand that I am fighting for the same values that your grandparents allegedly or your ancestors allegedly were around for.
Yeah,
I know
my grandparents, both my grandpas, they fought in World War II against Nazis. You represent the antithesis of my brave grandparents. You actually represent the Nazi thuggish force that still resides on this earth today. You are serving with the ideological inheritors of Hitler and Stefan Bandera. By the way, actually, before we get to the next question, let's ask Sarah, what are your thoughts on Stefan Bandera?
I think Bandera is a repugnant individual, and that's why the Ukrainians took away his Hero of Ukraine award. And while people can utilize a flag that came before Bandera, because the black and red flag predated Bandera, Bandera himself did some repugnant, horrific acts, and it's something that I can't stand behind.
So do you also think that everyone is repugnant, and do you also condemn everyone who are the ideological inheritors of Bandera today that you're serving in the military with as you carry out their ideological ambitions?
Your notion of ideological inheritance is actually
they've got Stefan Bandera
Russian
tattoos.
propaganda.
Wait, Sarah. They've got Stefan Bandera tattoos. They wave his flag. They quite literally, I mean, I told you moments ago that I believe it was Andrei Parabi, who was the leader of the Verkhovna Rada for 5 years, who said that he believes that Bandera was one of the most important heroes of Ukraine, and he was the leader.
Quoting someone who's not even in government anymore.
Yeah, I'm quoting
no,
him.
hold on. You keep quoting someone who's not even in government anymore.
I'm almost done. And he was also the leader of the Society to erect the Stefan Bandera monument. So do you condemn each and every person that also is carrying out the ideological ambitions of Stefan Bandera? Because Stefan Bandera is not around anymore, but all his card-carrying OUN members are.
The notion that people are carrying out his ideology versus looking at his visage as being something for them to rally around are two entirely different notions. Furthermore, your obsession with quoting politicians who are no longer in office is something that I wonder about, because we're here to debate the current full-scale invasion versus you continuing to bring up a former politician who's no longer serving in any official or unofficial capacity in the Zelensky administration.
Well, first of all, I mean, you still have all of the Nazi thugs that are waging this war right now, and you have Zelensky calling them brave heroes and dedicating monuments and awards to them, and risking even Western troops to go and save his life. So I don't think that if we're being as unbiased and balanced as possible here, I don't think it's really fair to state that the ideologies of Zelensky, if he has one, are all that dissimilar to the ideologies of those Nazis that I've listed that led us to the situation we're now in. I mean, if it wasn't for the Verkhovna Rada of 2014 to 2019, we would not be in the situation we find ourselves in.
You're bringing up government that's no longer there, and I can state what President Zelensky stands for. He stands for liberty. He stands for freedom.
Liberty. He stands for peace. He stands for justice.
Hold on, Jackson. Let her finish. Jackson, let her finish. Jackson, let her finish. Jackson, let her finish. Jackson, let her finish.
Sarah, do you think?
Okay, everyone's now muted. Jackson, let her finish. There's 900 people in the room. You keep speaking. Sarah's trying to speak. Let her finish. Let her finish and you can talk. It's that simple, dude. We've been going at this for an hour. I have one more question. Let Sarah finish.
Yeah, maybe I'll get one in.
Jeez.
Crypto lawyer, I can literally hear the estrogen, the soy-ass fucking estrogen coming out of your mouth.
That's fine.
Sarah, my question.
Jackson, you're muted again. You're going to ruin it for 900 people. Everyone is shooting up DMs, messages. You're interrupting. Sarah just wants to finish. We have let you talk the entire night. Let Sarah finish, and then I have one more question. That's it. If you continue to interrupt, I'll just mute you again. And this will be all done because of you. It's up to you. Sarah, go ahead and finish.
Let the record reflect this was all done because of me. This is all done because of me, despite the fact that, I've been interrupted countless times throughout this debate, and I've had to just put my tail between my legs and let the retards talk. This is all done because of me. So, Sarah, my question to you.
Jackson, are you going to let her finish or not?
There's other participants here, Jackson.
There's other people here. You just let her finish. Just that's all I'm asking. Let her finish, and then you can go on. I don't see what the problem is here. I mean, I am listening here. I'm trying to let you both speak. People are enjoying it. Just let Sarah finish, and we can move on to the next. You can respond, and then we can go to the next question.
This is the dumbest debate I've ever participated in.
So then leave, Jackson. Then leave.
I'm not going to leave because we have.
Okay,
we have a terrorist Ukrainian unregistered foreign agent, Sarah, who's in violation of FARA that's in this space right now.
So let her speak.
Let her talk then.
Let her talk then.
I was going to ask her a question.
Okay, well, let her finish her statement. Then you can ask a question. I mean,
All right,
that's
I'll let
fine.
it finish. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackson.
Sarah, say whatever propaganda garbage you want to say about Stefan Bandera.
Sarah, are you there?
Sarah, she's probably on the everyone got muted button.
Okay,
Well,
hey.
It's off now. Go ahead.
I just want to say I keep on seeing Michael Dean supporting Jackson's statements, and I almost wish Michael could speak because I can tell that he's, just in this enraptured fervor over Jackson's conspiracy theories. No, President Zelensky stands for freedom. He stands for peace. President Zelensky stands for sovereignty for the Ukrainian people that elected him with 73% of the vote. And ultimately, when the liberation of Ukraine takes place and a return to the 1991 borders, history is going to look back on President Zelensky and realize that no one stood for democracy in the way he has during the modern era. I'm finished.
Thanks, Sarah. Go ahead, Jackson.
Zelensky stands for democracy. Zelensky stands for free. You know what Zelensky stands for? Zelensky stands for each and every day taking an American, a U.S. deep state, 9-inch cock right up his fucking ass. That's what Zelensky stands for. Zelensky stands for the violent repression of the Orthodox Church in his country. Zelensky stands for silencing dissident media in his country. Zelensky stands for serving as a prostitute of the U.S. deep state in a proxy world war against Russia. Zelensky stands for, silencing all dissident political parties. Zelensky stands for violent war criminal reprisals against civilians in towns that they've retaken. Zelensky stands for all that is evil. Zelensky is waging a war against God and Christianity. And I'm going to make it my life pursuit of, letting the record reflect in history. And I don't think that I even have to do this because if you look at the sentiment of the American populace and 2/3 of the population across the world right now who's either neutral to or supportive of the Russians in their special military operation. But I'm going to also make it part of my life's mission to reflect the fact that Zelensky is a Nazi terrorist thug. He's no better than, the Al-Qaeda or the ISIS of Europe. And that's as simple as that. I mean, how could you ever say anything but that? He stands for everything that is the antithesis of democracy, freedom, and justice. He is a criminal, and if it were up to me, he'd be taken immediately to The Hague, to the ICC, and he'd be tried for copious amounts of war crimes. I don't even think that we have a full lifetime to go through and charge and penalize Zelensky for all the various war crimes that he's committed. But again, then we have Sarah here, who is an unregistered foreign agent serving in the Ukrainian military, which is not an ally of the United States. Therefore, it's a violation of the FARA Act, who is out here protecting everything that Zelensky says because she's quite literally paid to do it illegally.
All right. Last question I have, Jackson, I'll go to you first. How is this war going to end?
Oh, it's very simple. Very simple. This war, and I've said this since, the war began, this war is going to end however Russia wants it to end. And I guess it's slightly dependent upon whether or not the West tries to negotiate a peace deal. But as of right now, I mean, you see Zelensky come out and he makes statements saying, I will not negotiate with Russia until they leave Crimea. I will not negotiate with Russia until they leave the 100,000 plus square kilometers of territory that they're quote unquote illegally occupying. This is the new one that they came out with 2 weeks ago. I will not negotiate with Russia so long as Putin is in power. So this is quite something. And, it depends, I guess, slightly on whether or not the West wants to negotiate, because we all know Zelensky doesn't control anything. It's whether or not the West wants to negotiate. Zelensky is just their prostitute. And Russia, if the West doesn't want to negotiate with Russia, then Russia will end this in whatever way they see best fit. I'd not be surprised if Ukraine becomes landlocked, if, Russia takes Novorossiya, and if Poland moves in from the West. I would not be surprised about that. But we'll see. War is unpredictable. At the end of the day, the stated goal of the Russian military is denazification and demilitarization. That doesn't technically mean that they have to occupy Ukraine, but I think we all know the situation has changed since February 24th. What we do know is that Ukraine is actively being denazified, and it's actively being demilitarized with over 120,000 Ukrainian military personnel that have been KIA since February 24th, compared to the 15 to 20,000 Russian military personnel that have been KIA since February 24th.
All right, Sarah. Thanks.
It's going to end with a return to the 1991 borders. It's going to return with all of those kidnapped by the Russian Federation from Ukraine, returned to Ukraine. It's going to end with Vladimir Putin out of power. It's going to end with Russia no longer being a threat not only to Ukraine, but to the world at large. And it's going to end with a clear understanding that so much of the propaganda and lies being spouted by Jackson and other foreign agents of the Russian Federation being proven distrue, being proven fake, and ultimately it's going to end with the greatest victory for freedom and liberty since World War II for the world.
Why are you still are you done? Why are you still calling me a unregistered a foreign agent of Russia when we've proven I'm not, and we've proven that not only are you a foreign agent of Ukraine, but by FARA's own exemptions, you don't even meet the qualification of being exempt, and you're an unregistered foreign agent. Also, are you willing to make a bet for $1,000 USD? You know, I don't want to take any of your Ukrainian military soldier money that you're getting as you're an unregistered foreign agent violating FARA. Bet for $1,000 USD that Putin or one of his associates like Medvedev or something like that, Shoigu, will remain in power. The infrastructure of Putin's control will remain in power by the time this war is done.
I don't even know who's alive in Russia, because as President Zelensky stated himself, is Putin even alive? Is Medvedev even conscious of what's really going on? I can't take your money based off of these people that are not going to have any role in the end of this war.
No, you're right. And I don't want to make a bet either about that, because, you know, every other week I see how Putin is dying of cancer or dying of some crazy disease. He's already almost died of like 1,000 different diseases. So I don't want to make a bet about that either. But why don't we make a bet about $1,000 USD that Russia will be occupying Ukraine, significant portions of Ukraine, by the end of this war? Because you said that the lines will end with Ukraine going back to their 1991 borders. So I will make the bet that by the end of this, Russia will control all of Crimea and Russia will control sizable amounts of Ukraine by the end of the war. And so if you're so sincere about that, let's make a bet right now, $1,000 cash, that Russia will control Crimea and sizable amounts of Ukraine by the end of the war.
Because unlike Russian propagandists, I don't bet on the blood of civilians. I don't bet on the blood of innocents. And I don't bet and make money and profit off of warfare.
You literally do. You're a soldier in the Ukrainian military who's violating FARA. That is the verbatim of making money off of warfare.
Again, serving in the military and taking bets on the backs of innocent civilians and bloodshed are two entirely different undertakings.
I'm making a bet about how this war will end, and you're Slava Ukraining it up in Ukraine while you're LARPing as a soldier. And you may actually be killing civilians. I have no idea what you're doing over there, but we know that OSCE has said that Ukraine is killing civilians. So while you're saying that I'm making a bet on the backs of innocent civilians, you're out there actually fucking killing them on behalf of a foreign government that you're illegally serving in.
I'm very much legally serving for the Ukrainian.
No, we already confirmed that you're in violation of FARA, because Ukraine is not an ally of the U.S.
All right. Are we ready for some closing statements? All right. Sounds like we are. Jackson, you can go first. It's 4:55. Go till 4:57, 4:58. Go ahead and make your closing statement, and then Sarah will go.
Well, I feel like everything that's relative and needed to be said has been said. The Russians and the Russians and the Wagner Group are doing what needs to be done in Ukraine right now. And it's unfortunate that it came to this, because, again, the Russians tried to negotiate the Minsk I agreements. They tried to negotiate the Minsk II agreements. And as we recently saw, and as Sarah has not denied, the German authorities that were intricately involved in these agreements and negotiations has come out. Merkel came out, amongst other former German officials, have come out and said that when they were negotiating these quote-unquote peace agreements, they weren't actually trying to establish peace. They were just trying to buy Ukraine more time for the eventual war that they were planning and orchestrating against the Russians in this proxy world war. So this is what's happening right now. It's not a war for Ukraine's independence. If this was a war for Ukraine's independence, then back when this all started on February 24th, Ukraine should have, tried to establish a peace deal. They shouldn't have tried to become NATO's prostitute and wage a war that they knew they were going to lose. They are losing the war. Over 100,000 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory seized. Ukraine has lost about 100,000 to 115,000 more troops than the Russians have. This is not going well for them. It's not going to get any better for them. Soledar was lost. Klashivka was lost. Zaporozhye settlements to the north are being lost. Bakhmut will be lost very soon. And I still haven't heard whether or not, because, Sarah said that I was trying to make money off the backs of the bloodshed of innocent civilians. I said, well, Sarah, you're the one who's out there serving in the Ukrainian Nazi military. So I still haven't heard Sarah deny the fact that she has killed civilians or been responsible for civilian deaths, as it serves in the military of the Nazi thugs in Ukraine. So, Sarah, do you want to comment on that? Because I'd just like to get the record clear. Have you killed anyone? Have you killed any civilians or anything like that? Because, you're making quite the accusation of me while you're an unregistered foreign agent.
Is that the end of his statement, Crypto?
Yeah, I think he ended with a question to you. So you'll have 2 minutes to respond and to make a closing statement. Go ahead.
Why? Because we're fighting against an enemy. You mentioned the Wagner Group. You mentioned the Russian Federation soldiers. And unlike the terrorists of the Russian Federation and their private military contractors, we don't engage in wanton bloodshed and terrorism against the civilian population. Furthermore, when we look at peace, President Zelensky and the Ukrainian government has strived for peace since the elections of 2017. 2019. And ultimately, going forward, we're going to get that peace, just not in a way anyone expected. We're going to get a peace that's going to return the 1991 borders to Ukraine in a fully sovereign way. We're going to get back all of these civilians who were kidnapped by the Russian Federation. We're going to bring energy independence. Every point of the 10-point plan of President Zelensky is going to be carried out. Furthermore, after the full-scale invasion took place, Ukraine sat down for negotiations with the Russian Federation in Belarus in an attempt to stop the bloodshed in an early part of the full-scale invasion, and the Russian Federation declined to engage in any substantive manner. So ultimately, we're having to take weapons, and we will use these weapons to return the borders to the 1991 liberated Ukraine.
All right, thanks. Jackson, since you went first, do you have any rebuttal?
It's just crazy. It's like, how could you possibly think that Ukraine is going to get back their 1991 borders when the Crimean people voted 86% to join the Russian Federation? We saw that the people of Lugansk, Donetsk, Zaporozhye, and Kherson voted overwhelmingly to become part of the Russian Federation. It's just so silly. And I would say it's silly, but it's really not silly, because it's actually the mentality of a brain-dead, porn-addicted, transgender soldier in the Ukrainian military who's hell-bent on terrorism against the Russians, is deeply Russophobic, and wants nothing more than to see the collapse of Russian civilization. And it's very sad, because many people are going to die as a result of the mentality, the broken, retarded mentality that has been exhibited, is on full display throughout the course of this debate. And for the sake of humanity, I hope this doesn't escalate to world war, to a hot world war. But given the fact that there are people in the halls of D.C., in the halls of Langley, in the halls of the State Department, in the halls of City of London, within the military-industrial complex as well that are, have the mentality and the ideology that is not too far different from that.